So, hello everybody. If you ever wondered why some athletes look like they are moving in a different dimension of speed and efficiency, I think today's episode is going to be your roadmap to it. So, I'm joined once again by a coach, Ivan Zagorski, to dissect all of the controversies around this topic, with also moving into the high intensity world of neurological style training. We are going to dive deep into the topic about the Golgi tendon organ and how it resets. Then we are going to dive into the fascial tension and something about the mad so-called scientist principles of Marinovic and his associates. So please get ready to challenge everything you thought you knew about strength, because today I believe we are not just training, but also talking about the nervous system and not just covering the tissue issues. So Ivan, my friend, welcome back to the Let's Get Moving show. It's always a great pleasure to hear your wisdom firsthand.
Very glad to join you again.
Thank you. Thank you. The pleasure is always mine, my friend. So the things how I understand about the Golgi tendon organ here and as a reset organ. So I consider it as a governor in your tendons that's supposed to shut down the muscle contraction if it seems we put too much tension on it, just to prevent the injury. Marinovic, Shredder, and many other coaches in their training, they use these high-speed, high-tension movements to recalibrate these sensors, allowing, of course, the body to use more of its existing strength and somehow to manage it on a better way. But most athletes, as we all know, they are very tight because I believe that they are antagonist muscles. So the ones that should be relaxing at that point are firing simultaneously with agonist muscles. But I also think that this type of training teaches the nervous system to shut off the opposite muscle group instantly. It's basically, how should I say, like removing the emergency brake while hitting the gas pedal. But I also think that it's not about how many fibers, muscle fibers we have, but how fast we can fire them. And if we are firing them at the exact same time. So I think that is the point that we make the difference here. But my question to you is, how do you define neurological governance in your terms? And why does our brain put them there in the first place? So what do you think?
Well, I think the simplest explanation here is that the human organism is not particularly concerned with performance, but it's rather concerned with survival.
Yeah.
So it will always prioritize safety, and it will always shut off any kind of extra quote unquote performance if it feels that this performance is not safe. So the
Yeah.
way that it was always explained to me by coaches who worked with Jay Schroeder extensively was that your body will only give you access to what it thinks it can recover from. So,
Yeah.
for example,
Exactly.
if it's a tourist that is getting attacked by a tiger in some kind of a safari gone terribly wrong,
Yeah.
the body will give him a lot of access to all of the possible resources so he can try and get away from the tiger, because the risk of injury at that point is not as important as survival to the entire organism.
For
And
sure.
then when it comes to athletic performance, though, okay, an athlete's like, look, I really want to jump higher. I really want to run faster. But the nervous system is not particularly concerned with that because it would much rather play it safe and withhold some access. So in some ways, it's like having a very, very rich billionaire father who is only giving his son a couple of dollars here and there instead
Yeah.
of giving him all the resources that he wants. So
Yeah.
it is a protective survival mechanism. It is a good mechanism given how human beings developed. But for athletic performance, the key to neurological training is just reducing the threat level to the nervous system where it sees, okay, this type of performance, it's safe. And then you get access to it continuously.
Yes. And this is something that we, as a coaches, should taking more precautions of, and maybe even evolve our youngsters and young athletes to be introduced to this type of training. And Marinovic was often called the mad scientist. um, he deserved this kind of type. So, how would you describe it? So, what was the core obsession of his work, of his methodology, by your opinion, that actually deserved this kind of title of mad scientist?
Yeah, I think he focused a lot more on building the athletes from the inside out rather than from the outside in. So
Yeah,
the typical approach entails, building a certain strength base. And once you have that strength base and capacity, then adding a little bit more explosive work, high speed work, and things like that. But Marv Marinovich realized that it's all about how well the nervous system sends the signals to the muscles. And he also realized that true elite athleticism isn't about being as strong as possible. It's about how quickly you can contract and relax the right muscles and do it at the right rate to where, like you said earlier, the muscles are not interfering with each other, where you don't have the um, one muscle group doing the job of the other and holding on, create unnecessary co-contractions and things like that. And he also ultimately believed that you have to train at the speed of sport. And so he developed a lot of methods that were unconventional and unorthodox at the time, and to some extent still today. But all of them basically focused on how an athlete can become more efficient and move very well at high velocity without any unnecessary interference. Just basically focusing on having a clean signal from the brain to the muscle rather than just building up a certain capacity and a certain strength base.
and is it that why you practically the basic hypertrophy training often is the enemy to the elite neurological performance? Because when we look, okay, hypertrophy is something that I need. I need to gain more muscle fibers. So actually, they're going to do me here a favor, but actually, it's a contradictory here. So what do you think about it?
Yeah, I think the biggest problem with hypertrophy training a lot of times is that when an athlete performs heavy lifts, the reps become very grindy and slow, and there is not a lot of emphasis on technique. There's a lot of chasing a one rep max or a three rep max and
Yeah,
just getting strong at any cost. And so, what that forces the nervous system to do is to learn how to co contract to create this excess tension to
exactly.
stabilize
Yeah.
and protect the joints. And so at the end of the day, that is in some ways the opposite of elite athleticism, unless, of course, you're competing in something like powerlifting. But for team sports and combat sports, etc., you do need that lengthening and shortening of the appropriate muscles at the appropriate time. And so, for example, in the Jay Schroeder system, there was actually a recent post by Adam Archuleta, who has become kind of a legend in the strength and conditioning world. I don't know if he
Okay.
ever expected that, but all the strength coaches are interested in the Freak of Training video that he did with Jay Schroeder and his training. And so what he posted recently is he said, even though I had big weight room numbers, I learned very quickly that it's not about the weight on the bar, but it's about being in the right position to move that weight, to be able to move that weight as fast as possible. And it even comes down to like what kind of emotion you have to produce to move that weight as fast as possible, how you have to do it, how you have to approach that.
Okay.
And or a lot of focus on precision, So he said everything else is just basically momentum, which will result in injury or a reduction in performance. So I think classical hypertrophy training a lot of times misses out on that just in favor of weight no matter what. Whereas athletes, if they need to be lifting, they should be lifting very differently.
No, unfortunately, I'm not familiar with it, but I would gladly that you can send me a link to it so that I can research a little bit more about this topic. So basically, the Marinovic, when I was the first familiar and come to it, because I was following the MMA at the time, and I know the time when the George St. Pierre was actually fighting again for his title. It was the period when he lost his title, so he was introduced to Mark Marinovic training principles, and then also by then, also at the same time, simultaneously there was the BJ Penn, also doing the same thing. So this is where I got interested because I was following the way of George St. Pierre. And this is where I actually first come into the idea of Mark training principles I wanted to discuss a little bit more. But my question always were, any kind of type of training is, of course, stress demanding kind of things. But how we distinguished here between the muscular fatigueness and the neural fatigueness during the session? How you separate them from each other?
Yeah, so I think a lot of times when your nervous system is fatigued, you can still move quite a bit of weight as far as, classical strength training, which is why a lot of times you'd see typical concurrent training programs have some sprints or plyometrics in the beginning, and then they
Mm-hmm.
maybe do some power clean or some kind of a speed strength type of modality. And then
All
they
right.
would have the heavy lifting at the end. Whereas when the nervous system gets tired, I think primarily you notice it in the loss of position and loss of efficiency. So all this training, whether it's Marv Marinovich or Jay Schroeder or anybody else who's practicing that same philosophy. A lot of attention is on precision, and a lot of attention is in staying in the right position. And I think
Yeah.
that's the first thing that you notice, and that's why Marv Marinovich a lot of times programs what he calls peak reps. So, for example, you do 2 sets of a particular exercise, whether it's for quickness or speed, until your technique and your speed starts to drop. So when you notice that the movements are no longer easy and elastic and free flowing and they become more muscular, that's a big sign of neural fatigue within the set. As far as the more global neural fatigue, I think it's just the overall loss of precision in movements. And I think anytime you start kind of muscling and straining too much instead of making the movements effortless, even though your nervous system is working hard, that's when you know that you're starting to hit your particular fatigue threshold.
Okay, but is this the point where we actually should do the absorption of force principles at the beginning? That they have to predicate the production of force first. Is that the principle? So you think maybe we should approach a different kind of method here?
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of people tend to skip ahead to all the cool stuff that they see online, all the
Yeah,
crazy plyometrics and the quickness and the footwork drills and the chaos drills that Marv Marinovich likes, for example, where the coach yells out different commands and the athlete has to react in real time, or the rebounds and the various like Russian lunge jumps that Jay Schroeder athletes do. But I think at the end of the day, yes, the force absorption piece has to come much earlier in the training. But even before that, I think there has to be a lot of positional training. So just learning how to stay in position and how to work in position for an extended period of time should precede the absorption of force, because then you get to see how you can engage as many different tissues as possible. You get to see all of your compensations and just kind of slow down a little bit, and then once you're able to do that, then you can absorb force efficiently, basically doing the same thing at a slightly higher velocity. So in the J Schroeder system, you have the ISO extremes as the foundation. I'm sure we can talk a little bit about that as well.
yeah.
In the Mark Marinovich system, you have the ball work, which is a little bit higher velocity, but it's kind of the same idea that you have to basically get yourself ready for impacts in a slightly slower, more controlled setting. And then, yes, you have to go to the absorption of force, because your body is not going to give you access to, let's say, a 40-inch vertical jump unless you can land with precision from that same 40 inches over and over and over and over again. So, again, until the
Yeah.
nervous system thinks it's not going to give you access to that. So, yeah, that's a huge piece that a lot of people are missing in their training.
Hmm. And how would you also explain the role of the Golgi tendon organ by your own terms? And also maybe when it comes to the comparison of the elite sprinting and jumping, this is maybe like what I see, something that is very necessary, because there are two different variables. So we have also the vertical and the horizontal output here. So it can differ. Um, so it's not also the same if you're training some volleyball player per se, or maybe in other dimension, like if you are training coaching the sprinter on 100-meter dash. So how would you see and define the GTO here?
Yeah, I think in simple terms, it just acts as a kind of a governor, and it will reduce the muscle tension again if it feels that the body is going over its perceived limits. So again, if it thinks that it's not something that it can easily recover from, then it's just going to reduce output. It's going to reduce stiffness, which will obviously result in a lower vertical jump, in slightly lower speed. Even in some moments during the game when there is a sudden change of direction, it might kind of hit the brakes a little bit and create this governor. So essentially, it's like you can have an engine that's huge. You know, you can build up a 1,000 horsepower engine, but unless you train yourself to remove those governors and to basically teach the GTO that this level is safe by graded exposure, reducing threat levels, and things like that, then you're just going to have a huge engine that's going to cost a lot to service, and that's going to take up a lot of resources. But the speed limit, the electronic limiter, is still going to be like, say, 200 kilometers an hour. You want to go 250, 300, extra horsepower isn't going to help here. So again, I think it's a very necessary mechanism for survival. It's a very good protective mechanism. But for athletes, they have to very gradually retrain it to accept higher levels of force and tendon stiffness.
Exactly. And how would you trick the nervous system here into allowing maybe a higher threshold of tension? You also mentioned the, excuse me, some of the principles of Mark Marinovich training principles. You had the medicine, the Swiss ball here, for example. There it was also a swimming training or training underwater with this Supra-Pulsing. How does it change the way the athlete moves here? Can you also elaborate here a little bit more and explain to our audience?
Yeah, so I think the ultimate idea here is to get the nervous system firing very, very quickly, like it would in a sprint or a max effort vertical jump, but finding environments where it can do that safely. So in the pool, you're not going to have huge ground contact forces, obviously. So you can do very fast movements there and get the nervous system firing very quickly without that risk of impact. So now that removes a certain layer of protection there, because the nervous system sees,
Yeah,
okay, this level of movement is safe. And it's also obviously good for recovering from injuries. Not all of them, but a lot of the injuries you can recover from in a swimming pool by getting the nervous system firing earlier than you otherwise would in conventional rehab. And then when you're doing the Swiss ball work, a lot of it is something like having one leg on the ball and then you're hitting that ball with the other leg. So you're bracing for impact, but it's not quite the ground contact forces of, 2 to 3 to 5 to 7 times body weight, like during sprinting or cutting. But again, it just
yeah,
teaches that elastic recoil. It teaches the nervous system to fire quickly. In the Jay Schroeder system, iso extreme lunge, you're barely moving, for example. You're pulling into position. It's not a lot of visible movement, but you do it for a long period of time, and the nervous system has to coordinate a whole bunch of muscles and essentially maintain a lot of tension. So it's almost like you are sprinting for 5 minutes as far as how the nervous system is working. And that
yeah.
also makes it understand, okay, this is safe in a more controlled setting. And now we can start to take that to the next level and do force absorption and force redirection, and slowly adapt from there once you already have that capacity and you remove that first layer of protection.
Of course. I love how the way you wrap this up, but do you believe, is there a genetic limit to our neural output? Or maybe like a ceiling that much higher than we think?
I think the ceiling is way higher than we think, and I think a lot of times it's been limited by the kind of a classic approach to load management and
Yeah,
periodization and things like that. And I understand why these concepts are very effective. Don't get me wrong, but I think
yeah,
ultimately, if you train differently, not just chasing muscle fatigue, thinking that if a muscle fatigues, then it's going to adapt and become stronger. If you focus on the neurological side, you will see that there are way fewer limits. And really, nobody is ever going to hit 100% of that. I mean, in my earlier example, even if a tourist is running away from the tiger, that might be something like 80 to 90% of his overall capacity. So the body is always going to hold something back.
yeah,
And, when people within the Jay Schroeder or the Marvin Marinovich system talk about performance exercises with max intent, it's still understood that there's always more, that there's always another layer that you can go to. And, some people are able to do something like 4 to 500 altitude drops per training session in the J Schroeder system. They're able to hold
Well,
isoics for 10 minutes plus, with a ARP wave electrical stimulator hooked up to certain muscles, creating even more of a neurological drive. And, in the Marv Marinovich system, you see them doing some extremely fast drills and going very quickly for a long period of time. Whereas the conventional wisdom would say, you have to do very small amount of reps for these kind of explosive movements and depth drops, etc. But I think once the nervous system releases some of those governors, yeah,
sorry,
let's
my
go.
friend. So let's go. Um, Ivan, how does the vestibular system here, when we talk about the balance here, as a bottleneck for power output? So what do you believe is the right thing here?
Yeah, I think just going back to the fact that the human organism is wired towards survival primarily.
Mm-hmm.
One of the most dangerous things to survival in the primal world was falling down, because then that
Yeah.
it would expose the early human to various predators and just possible injury and things like that. So a lot of times I think the vestibular system can limit power output when it doesn't feel safe as far as the balance, which is why we know that, a lot of these trends in the strength and conditioning industry of squatting or doing some kind of strength exercise on a Bosu ball might have some vestibular system benefits, but it's not going to allow you to produce maximum force from that, because your
Mm-hmm.
body is going to naturally limit how much force you're allowed to produce when you are in an unstable position.
You mentioned it. The shredder is very also known for his extreme long duration isometrics over 5 minutes. And what is the neurological intent behind it? So, and how we should put it, like maybe in a frame of creating this periodization model for our athletes. Where would you put this kind of work? Should we do it in the foundational phase first, or maybe even put it like also during the year spread it?
So
Where,
there are a whole lot of different benefits to the extreme isometrics. So
hmm
first and foremost, you get to spend a lot of time in a certain position, which will basically expose all of the neuromuscular compensations. It will expose all of the weak spots as you're doing it, because over time, if some muscle is compensating and basically doing the job of another one, it will eventually burn out. So the gold standard is to do an iso extreme exercise for 5 minutes all the way through unbroken. And
yeah.
essentially, over that time, you are eventually going to run into the situation where that compensating muscle can't keep compensating. So other muscles eventually have to get involved, and you have to figure out how to get as much tissue involved in that movement as you possibly can. And you'll
hmm
notice some of the different things happening there, like how some structures tend to burn out, others start to get involved the more and more you do it. And so that's the primary benefit, is just being able to be in a extremely slow environment where you can notice all of your neuromuscular compensations and also fix them at the same
Yeah.
time. A duration like 5 minutes will allow you to cycle through all of the energy systems and eventually get to a point where your recovery is just going to be absolutely next level, as well as endurance, because you're teaching your body to have the energy systems support each other and cycle through each other, as opposed to doing like a short interval training where you burn out a particular energy system without this kind of mechanism where it gets to be supported by others. So they are very, very good for recovery in that sense. And also, like I said, it's a very high neural drive activity, which is very similar to something like sprinting. And we know that you can only sprint at absolute max velocity so many times. So to
Yeah.
get a similar stimulus without added ground contacts, you can do something like ISO extreme lunge, for example, which is a very similar position to sprinting, uh, pretty much an identical position to some parts of the triple jump, and basically work through very high neural drive activity for much longer. And essentially, these type of benefits allow you to build a whole lot of capacity and almost recover at the rate of work, because you're going to eventually teach the right muscles to lengthen and the appropriate muscles to shorten at the same rate. So you are basically not using any more energy than you absolutely should be. And if you notice, the elite athletes, Michael Jordan flying through the air, for example, Ronaldo breaking ankles with a soccer ball, things like that. It almost looks like they're not even trying, even though their nervous system is working at very high output. Their movements are very efficient. They're not using any kind of extra energy. So this is the baseline for teaching something like that. And it's interesting that you bring up the place of this activity within the training cycle, because I think once you get good at it, you can pretty much use it year round. I've had athletes do it in season, after games, uh, the day before a game, maybe even the day of the game, and a lot of it comes down to just being so efficient that you can actually use it for recovery. So in the system, a lot of times when you would do something like altitude drops or rebounds or some kind of activity like that, you can then use the ISO extreme lunge to recover from that. And once you get pretty good at it, you do a full workout of several ISO extreme exercises. And 30 minutes later, you feel like you didn't even work out today. So you can do it
Mhm.
multiple times a day. And I believe you can pretty much do it throughout the year. Obviously, it takes a little bit of acclimation for an athlete to become efficient at it. But once the athlete becomes efficient, I think it's a secret weapon that can be utilized year round.
Okay, but how would you dissect this in a term of duration of a particular practice session? Because we know that neurological demand is much more higher than a physical demand, and we also talk about the difference between the alpha thickness here. But how would you actually proportionally maybe dissect in a small macro or micro cycle here? We know that
Well,
Marinovic. Yeah, please answer. There was some short
Mhm. So
delay with.
when it comes to the
Can you
yeah,
hear
yeah.
me?
So
Answer.
when
Yeah,
it comes to
please
the
go on.
so when it comes to the ISO extreme activities, the kind of a standard that I'm being taught right now as I'm working with a very experienced coach in the system is just basically you have to be able to hit 5 minutes in a number of foundational ISO extreme exercises before moving on to the other phases like force absorption and things like that. But understanding the reality of the athletes that they do, high impact activities, plyometric sprints, and things like that within their training session, I think really the way to incorporate it is just to do exercises that will give you the most bang for the buck. So it's something like iso extreme wall squat, lunge, push up, or a dip, for example, and a pull up, scap hang, or inverted row. So something that would allow you to hit a lot of muscle groups at once. It will allow you to get a lot of motor units firing, engaging the most muscle fibers, and just have the athletes do that. Either, in addition to their strength training, if they absolutely have to strength train traditionally, or just even as its own separate system, because a lot of times when you get good at these iso extremes, the strength goes up so much because the athlete has so much more neural drive, so much more intent, and is able to involve so much more tissue in any of the strength movements. So really, I think they can be incorporated in any type of a microcycle in any type of a fashion. But the idea here is to do them consistently. And once you get good at them, the recovery will go up so much that will allow you to do everything else so much better.
And in your case scenario, how does the neurological warm up here maybe look like compared to a traditional one? You also spoke and very good. You make the emphasis of Mark Marinovic and his variety of incorporating chaos in movements over the same repetitive lifts where the most of the coaches are maybe using it. So how do we use this high frequency vibration and maybe putting the athlete on some instability ground that plays into that removing that neural blocks that we have. So how would you differ here maybe an orthodox maybe approach to a training session? How should I call it?
So when it comes to the neurological warm up, it's just more about focusing on the nervous system and knowing that the neurological training itself should get you to a point where you don't even have to warm up in a traditional sense. So, for
Mhm.
example, I have a friend who is a very seasoned martial arts instructor. He's been doing traditional martial arts for close to 30 years now. You know, he said that the Chinese senseis always taught him to just be able to go anytime. He said, like, look, if somebody comes up to you and wants to fight you, you're not going to be like, okay, let me get my bands, let me do my activation real quick. You have to be ready to go right away. So I think the training itself should make your muscles so efficient and your fascial lines so coherent that you won't
Yeah.
even need to warm up and like worry about pulling something. So then the neurological warm up, a lot of it is some basic stuff. Like let's say you can do the cross crawl pattern, like opposite arm, opposite leg, moving that. You can do a lot of the eye movements stuff, for example, so you can track a finger with your eyes without moving the head. And the eyes are obviously connected to all the different muscles. So once you do that type of warm up, your muscles will automatically engage. And just doing any kind of drills that maybe involve a lot of coordination and fine motor skills, something like juggling is good. um, Marv Marinovich likes to use the slant boards a lot. So standing on the slant board in different ankle positions. So not just here with the heel hanging off, but also on this side, and on every side.
Yeah.
Standing on the slant board while juggling or while throwing tennis balls. So anything that just gets the nervous system firing, I think will go a long way. And, I think the core body temperature will kind of tend to go up from some of these things. And then you're just basically hitting all the necessary prerequisites for a general warm up. Now, when it comes to the vibrational training and the instability training, Marv Marinovich was never a fan of things like the Bosu balls. He had those kind of balanced discs that do provide you a stable surface, but they move kind of unpredictably. He also uses a lot of PVC pipes. So when you're standing on PVC pipes and you have to kind of grip them with your feet like a bird sitting on a branch
Like a gecko,
would have.
like a gecko. Yeah.
So he liked to use a lot of these tools, and first you're just rolling on those pipes, and then you're able to jump on them and even do small walks on them. So I think these things are really good. Working on slant boards is also great, whether it's just balancing on it or jumping on it and things like that. So I think just something like a Bosu ball, I was always taught by the Soviet coaches that it just teaches the ankle to be more unstable. Whereas if it's a more solid surface, but that still provides a component where the muscles have to fire and the contract and stabilize very quickly, is a much better solution there, which is what Marv Marinovich did in his training.
Yeah, as you said about the recoiling, so this is where the secret lies. But for most of the coaches maybe out there, it's very interesting. You very well dissect how we should train it, but how we can find the hidden weaknesses here, these neural glitches that they don't show up so easily on a standard strength test. So what is your maybe key here?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. A lot of great athletes are very good at compensating. And because they're so good, you don't really notice that they're doing anything wrong. People like to look at an unorthodox sprint technique or the way an athlete jumps and say, okay, you should all jump like this guy. He has like a 46-inch vertical or something. Because you're right, they don't really show up right away. But I think a lot of the exercises in the nervous training system modalities are designed to both expose and correct certain weaknesses. Like I said, in the iso extreme lunge, for example, you would have body parts shaking pretty quickly. You would have your foot, pronating, or the knee going way over the toe, getting out of position, or forward torso lean, or any kind of other variety of compensations, which obviously indicates certain weaknesses that the body doesn't trust certain structures. And as you do these exercises more, you're forced to engage certain muscles there that you maybe didn't engage as much before. In the Marinovich system, it's the same idea. It happens at a little bit of a higher velocity though, when you do the foundational ball work and some of the other exercises. And there was a coach that was showing the video of one of his athletes doing a very fast twitch movement, And then he slowed the video down and he says, like, look at how his left limb's twitching compared to the right limb. And you can obviously see these compensations. So I think in a good system, these type of foundational phases will both expose and allow you to correct these types of weaknesses right away. Also, within the J Schroeder system, the use of direct current electrical stimulators is absolutely huge. So, the device like a ARP Wave, for example, I've used extensively, and it allows you to just basically search for your weak points. You get a little bit of like a electrode pad, and you scan it over sensitive areas with the electricity going through the stimulator. And if in a certain area it really zaps you and it feels uncomfortable, okay, there's a disconnect here. So then you can place a pad specifically on that area and do very targeted and very precise work on that area at specific pulse frequencies based on what you're dealing with, and kind of shore up these weak areas like that as well. And I think it's absolutely great because it's kind of like the second brain that processes signals much faster than your brain would. So the re-education of the body can take place incredibly quickly.
Yeah, and that's definitely another level of training and practicing that we also reconsider and embrace in our coaching. But we spoke a lot about the performance here, but I think we should also mention something about the recovery systems. And if the nervous system is the driver for everything, so how we can track the recovery? Do we use the HRVs, the central nervous system tap test? How would you, recommend? Okay, this specific athlete is maybe reaching his red zone. We should maybe put some brakes on it.
Yeah, I think HRV is a very good indicator generally. If it tends to crash, then obviously there is an issue there. Tap
Yeah,
test can be also good. I do use it with my athletes. I don't think it determines fully how much the nervous system is down. I think it's just a very kind of a specific test. But it can be kind of one of the early signs. I always tell the athletes that I work with just kind of pay attention to the signs. I mean, all of them have been overtrained or burned out at some point or another. So another big
yeah.
one I think is sleep disruptions. I think if the sleep quality drops, or there's a bout of insomnia, or waking up earlier than normal, not being able to go back to sleep afterwards, can all play a role. Ultimately, everybody reacts to stress differently. So some people might get a little bit more irritable. Some people might get a little bit more aggressive. So I think it's just paying attention to all of these signs and not necessarily tying yourself to a particular metric. And I think it's also important to realize that even if something like that happens, it doesn't automatically mean that performance the next day is going to absolutely crash. I think there's a little bit of a reserve in the nervous system, but certainly these are signs that you might have to dial some training down, take some time off. But what I also don't want with my athletes is saying, "Oh, I did so much worse on tap test than before. Oh, HRV or something, and I have a game the next day." So I don't want them automatically putting in their mind that they're going to perform worse just because of that. It's just kind of a sign that they need to pay attention to and just take preemptive measures before it gets worse. And ultimately, in these type of neurotraining modalities, you're not just training the physical. The acronym that Jay Schroeder uses is PIPES. And I heard the same acronym, but obviously Russian, from a Soviet era boxing coach. So essentially, you're training the physical, the intellectual, the psychological, emotional, and spiritual aspects. So when you're fully engaged in the training, then you're more able to see where one of these elements is becoming weaker. And again, that can also be a sign that maybe you're doing too much, or maybe you're approaching training the wrong way. And it's just more of a holistic approach, I think, that allows you to better self-regulate. I think ultimately these type of sessions force you to communicate better with your body. So once you have a better connection established, for example, then you're able to recruit muscles better, more effectively. So you can talk about it from the perspective of just these exercises forcing you to fire more motor units, get access to more muscle fibers. But ultimately, it's that whole communication from the brain to the muscle that improves, and the better signal you have, the more efficiently you're able to perform your regular moves. So even though you might have, like on paper after a training session, you might have some fatigue, for example, that you think is built up. I think a lot of that superior nervous system communication will do you better than just trying to stay fresh no matter what and take extra days off when that kind of a communication channel starts to get cluttered or not as clean otherwise. So I think that's really primarily what that accomplishes, which is why some athletes are able to do a pretty intense neurological training session the day of the match, maybe a few hours before the match, then be able to recover quickly and still maintain that kind of potentiation through improved.
Practically, yes. Now, so Ivan, so this is where actually the rate of force development can actually impact. So what is the relationship, by your opinion, between the visual system and maybe the muscular firing patterns here when we exercise them?
Yeah, so first of all, the eyes are connected to all of the muscles, which is why, like a visual
Mm-hmm.
warm up kind of activates the muscles and engages them a lot. Also, going right back to the survival mechanisms, for example. So, a body is not going to let you run very fast if it doesn't see where it's going. If the vision is kind of impaired a little bit, then it's also going to start to put the brakes on a lot of the fast and explosive activities there. So it's very important
All right.
to train the vision and because the body is a full holistic system that is interconnected. And again, it's going to prioritize survival. But if your vision is good, if the vision is set, and you train the visual system as much as you train any other system, that's also going to give you a superior result. It's going to give the body that confidence that it can do what you ask for it to do.
All right. But in this matter, um, when we introduce this type of training session, can then afterwards the traditional heavy lifting actually make an athlete slower when we reinforce the protective governors here or not? Is there any difference?
Well, I think a lot of it depends on how you lift. So I think if you're emphasizing the right position and the precision and technique and moving the weight as fast as possible, you're going to get a lot more out of the weight training sessions rather than just constantly putting more and more weight on the bar. Because, obviously
Mm-hmm.
in a lot of sports, it's inevitable that you're going to need to pack on some muscle mass, rugby, American football, to an extent, something like heavyweight wrestling, also, and
Yeah.
maybe even in something like basketball, you are a center and you're being pushed around by heavier guys. You're going to need to add some bulk, but I think if you do it the right way, the nervous system training can actually be of huge benefit because then you're going to learn how to engage more muscle fibers. You're going to learn how to be more present in the process of lifting, and you're going to be able to move weight faster. On top of that, the nervous system training itself, I think, can actually give you surprising hypertrophy benefits because, something like the ISO extreme lunge, people talk about, time under tension being a factor for hypertrophy. Well, you spend a lot of time under tension there. And the nervous system starts to understand, okay, if we're going to be doing these type of activities, we're going to need this muscle to be bigger, this muscle to be more efficient. And so a lot of times people either lose excess weight or they gain a little bit of weight and a little bit of muscle just from doing that because the nervous system determines that this is what's really important. So, but I think once you set that foundation, you're going to be able to get a lot more out of the traditional lifting as long as you're focusing on position, precision, and speed at which the weight moves rather than just chasing strength numbers.
Okay. So is this practically the to-go sign how we actually need to train the brain to stay in a high performance state under these extreme circumstances and stressors? So how much isometrics or choking here under pressure is actually a neurological governor here by snapping back into place? On which occasion maybe we are snapping out of this situation? Is there any?
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of this choking under pressure and things like that is also the nervous system just shutting off certain resources, slowing down reaction time or creating unnecessary tension because maybe it doesn't feel that that particular situation is safe. First from a kind of a tribal or a social perspective, where your teammates are maybe counting on you and you are scared to let them down, something like that. And also just in general, like how safe your nervous system feels in these competitive environments. So your preparation has to be so challenging that the game is just basically like you resting. Like, I'm so glad I'm not doing the training right now. I get to play a game
Yeah.
for the next couple hours. Like, this is great. And so I think once you prepare for that, and once you're able to maintain calm under chaos while doing some of these nervous system training modalities, your execution is going to improve a whole lot, because you're just going to have so much more resilience, and you're just going to be so much more prepared for all these things. And in the it kind of goes back to the PIPES acronym. If you're just training the physical, then you're missing out on a whole lot. If you're training the physical, intellectual, psychological, emotional, and spiritual, then you are fully preparing basically your entire being. And if one of these elements is the weaker link, you're only performing up to your weakest link. So you could be super strong. Maybe they're emotional or intellectual or psychological issues. Then
Yeah.
you're only performing to that lowest, weakest link. But this training allows you to fully lock in, be fully present, and to build all of those up. And that would transfer very well to things like not choking under pressure and just being able to stay calm regardless of the situation.
Yeah, definitely. So this is something that needs to be a metric for our foundation. But when we talk about the neurological side of it, and a training session under these circumstances, we also need to mention fascia here. And fascia is practically a second nervous system to me. So what role does the fascia play here in this style of in this type of training?
Yeah, so I think nowadays online you see a lot of kind of fascia gurus saying that you have to train the fascia separately
Hmm.
and things
Yeah,
like that. I don't necessarily believe that. I think that any good training will train all of the systems. It will train the fascia, it will train the muscles, the tendons, and so on and so forth. But at the end of the day, fascia is kind of your tension network. So a lot of the fascia researchers talk about the tensegrity model, where they show this kind of a tensegrity structure, which is rigged up in a certain way where this tension allows it to maintain its integrity. And I think a lot of
yeah,
times when you train the fascia through these nervous system modalities, you stop having energy leaks within the system. So from the foot upwards, you don't have any energy leaks. There's the right amount of tension. You're kind of more tight in a good way, not where you always have to stretch because your muscles feel like they're made of wood, but you have that stored energy. You have the right length tension relationship, and you're able to really utilize the elastic qualities that are so much needed for sport, like repeat jumps, cutting, things like that. And so it's important to train the fascia. I just don't think you can train it separately, but it's just important to kind of recognize its role and to assess the athlete to see if he has any kind of energy leaks or something like that in that department. And by having a good training system, you will address these anyway. And so, like, if you think about something like someone like a tiger, for example, they don't do a lot of like stretching and foam rolling. They just come in, they're like, put their paws out, stretch once, and that little cat stretch or whatever, couple of
yeah.
seconds, and they're good. Because their fascial integrity is so good, they don't really need to work on all these tight places. They have all the right collagen fiber alignment and things like that. So good training will align the fascial lines very well for maximum performance in the very positions that you need to perform in.
Definitely. And in a sense, when an athlete comes to you, there is mostly like strength based, not just as a mindset, but also as a quality for an athlete. How do you transition an athlete from strength based mindset or type of guy to a neural based one? Is there any process that you reconsider before you know doing your training sessions?
Well, I think a lot of it is just allowing them to try a new training modality, because athletes are going to immediately see a lot of their weaknesses exposed. So some guy who thinks he does, a lot of weight in the weight room. He does Nordics all the way up and down and things like that. You give him a little bit of like a Marv Marinovich ball work, for example, his hamstring starts to cramp. You put him in a Jay Schroeder style iso extreme lunge. You tell him he's got to go for 5 minutes. He can barely manage 2 minutes. And
Yeah,
a guy who is, who's got huge forearms, you tell him to do iso extreme push up. He is like so embarrassed to even tell me what time he got on it. So I think a lot of it is just giving them that opportunity to see these weaknesses for themselves